In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Today, we celebrate Epiphany, also known as Three Kings Day. After a long journey around the living room, the three wise men figures finally get to make it to the manger, and we finally get to sing We Three Kings, that beloved carol, which, incidentally, was written by an Episcopalian. But the careful reader will note that in Matthew, who tells us about the wise men's visit to Bethlehem, there isn't mention of them being kings, nor is there reference to there being three of them. The idea that they were kings probably comes from the Isaiah passage that we read that talks about kings coming to Jerusalem bringing gifts. And the thought that they were three likely comes from the three presents: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. We don't know whether the wise men were kings or how many of them actually went to Bethlehem. But it is interesting that while we talk so much about the three kings in this story, there are two other kings who are indisputably part of it. As our passage from Matthew begins, in the time of King Herod, wise men came asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews?" Now, if you were Herod at that time, this might have struck you as an odd question. You'd be thinking, wait a minute, I'm the King of the Jews. And he was. That was actually his title. Herod the Great was appointed king over Judea as a vassal of the Roman Empire. His title of great notwithstanding, Herod was a very bad guy. Historical documents, such as the writings of Jewish historian Josephus, describe his tyranny as a leader. He spent lavishly on building projects paid for by taxes that impoverished the Jewish people. He lived a decadent lifestyle, and he was intensely paranoid. He surrounded himself with 2,000 bodyguards, and he had monitors in the streets to find out what people were saying about him. Perhaps the worst of it, though, was that he executed members of his own family, including his wife, brother-in-law, and 3 of his sons. He also had a number of rabbis killed. Matthew's characterization of Herod as paranoid, easily threatened, and brutally vindictive seems to be consistent with these historical writings. Matthew describes how upon hearing about the child king, Herod was frightened, and all of Jerusalem with him. As an aside, we can wonder why it says that the people were also afraid. And one thought is, it's because they were colluding with Herod, and another king would threaten their power too. Or it could have been because they were familiar with the consequences of Herod's wrath, and if he was afraid, they all had reason to be afraid. Matthew's account of the massacre in Bethlehem, where Herod tries to have Jesus killed by killing all the baby boys in Bethlehem, also reflects Herod's willingness to kill anyone who stood in his way. However, this isn't cited in other historical writings, nor is there archaeological evidence of it. For this reason, most Herod scholars don't think it happened, though a few maintained that it fits with Herod's character, and given the small size of Bethlehem, the event could have gone unrecorded. But while these details are debated, there doesn't seem to be any dispute about Herod's character and the kind of person that he was. He was someone who would do anything to acquire or maintain power, and his only concern was for himself. This was who was in power at the time of Jesus' birth. And so it's interesting. radical even, that while Herod was sitting on his throne in Jerusalem, the region's urban center and locus of political power, another king was being born in the small, inconsequential town of Bethlehem. As the reference in Matthew from the prophet Micah suggests, it was a place that was seen as least among lands. And here, a child is born, King of the Jews, who will grow up to be everything that Herod is not. Where Herod would do anything to ascend to power, Jesus, God's Son, would descend to earth, emptying himself of power, as Paul says, and becoming like us. Where Herod showed an utter disregard for life, Jesus, time and again, would show that every life matters to God, coming alongside people who society deemed worthless. Where Herod took life in his quest for power, Jesus said, "Whoever wants to gain his life must lose it," and gave his life for others. Where Herod craved admiration and wanted to be the greatest, Jesus taught that humility and being great comes through being last and least. Jesus was constantly using whatever power he had to give power to others, calling unlikely, insignificant people to rise up as leaders. Where Herod lived in paralyzing fear, Jesus lived in a place of assurance rooted in God's love, a kind that no one and nothing, not rulers, not even death, can take away. In modeling this counterintuitive power and inviting us to come and follow him, Jesus reveals that power isn't just for the Herods of this world. We are all meant to be powerful in the way that Jesus was, a power that comes to us as children of God. His power on earth was revealed through his humility, how he empowered others, his forgiveness, and the way he loved and gave of himself. An example we are all called to follow, and a way of life that is possible for us all. Today, the reading from Matthew juxtaposes two kings, two vastly different takes on what it means to be powerful. And while Herod is an extreme version, he isn't that far off from the way the world envisions power. A way that assumes that everyone should be in pursuit of being the greatest, no matter the cost. A way that is unreflective about how our own pursuit to get ahead can come at the expense of others being left behind. Herod's actions are easy to condemn, and yet how much of his model of power is present in society and goes unquestioned. Much like the people in Jerusalem who were afraid, it may feel like our options are either to join Herod's way of power or to live in fear of those who are like him. But the wise men in the story are our portal to show us that we do have a choice. They confronted Herod, his kingship, his false, perverted power, by asking for the other king. They had the audacity to go before the King of the Jews and say, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? Where is the true king who embodies real power?" We, like the wise men, are given a similar choice. We can recognize the power we choose, who and what we follow, and the kind of power we model in our own lives. We always have a choice. The way of Jesus is not the easier way. It's a counterintuitive understanding of power, but it's a better way. So which king will we choose to follow? Amen.